Our next speaker is Sara Donoghugh. Sara has an econometrician background with experience working with clients such as IKEA and VW, looking at ways to optimize their marketing investment. The key to her career success has been in translating statistical findings into easy-to-understand insights with actionable recommendation. She will give us a glimpse on how organizations are using HR analytics, which is the focus of her organization, Pearl Metrics. So I'll leave the floor to you, Sara.
Thank you. So I was going to introduce myself, but I don't think I need to now. So I run an independent HR analytics consultancy called Pearl Metrics in London. Thank you. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about how I got into that industry and now the challenges that I faced along that way. And there's a chance that you might not know much about HR analytics and this kind of industry, although we've actually had a couple of talks that touched on it today, which I was really pleased to hear. But hopefully at the end of my 15 minutes, you'll know a little bit more about this sort of growing industry that I believe is taking off. So you've probably heard from the panel discussion, my background is in maths and statistics, and after my degree I ended up in a job in advertising where I used my mathematics to build econometric models for advertising clients, and my job was to work out the sales that were attributable to advertising, and ultimately so that we could put a return on investment of the investments that clients were putting into their advertising. So across 15 years, I worked for some absolutely amazing brands across almost every industry, from retail through to cars and baked goods. But after about 15 years, I was really sort of desperate for a change because I found myself having the same conversations year in, year out. And I found that I could do the job sort of standing on my head, and I really wanted a new challenge. And it was a theme, I guess, that we talked about in our panel discussion. And sort of found the fact is there's only so many conversations that you can have about bread sales before you think, I need to start doing something else. So back in about 2013, I found myself having a conversation with a business coach. And he'd been working with a company to teach all of their employees a new skill set, and he wanted to go back and sell them a second course. But he was really struggling with how to do that, and we sat down and had a conversation about it. And I just said, well, actually, what you need is a business case. You need to know what the return on investment is that your company is going to get from investing in another training program with you. So we sat down and put a business case together. We sort of talked about whether employees were going to be more loyal if they did the case with him and how much more productive they were going to be. And not only did he sell in a second course, but he's actually been working with that company for years now. And I was fascinated by the idea that my skill set in econometrics and marketing and data science could actually be employed in a different direction and one to help people get more out of their careers. So obviously I'd started off thinking about how to evaluate training. But the more I spent time thinking about how data analytics could be applied to the people space, the more opportunity I could see, because in theory there's data being processed and collected at every stage of an employee journey. So everything from when they enter an organisation through to the amount of investment that a company is making in them, through to when they leave, what kind of people leave. And then ultimately, most companies are obviously most focused on how much profit they're going to get from their people. You apply data science to all of those different data streams, and you've got this huge ability to make data-led decisions rather than just using gut instinct. Things like, what does my optimal hire look like? Or, we're all concerned with employee engagement, but actually, what does that really mean? And which elements of it are most important? So I actually figured back in 2013 that HR analytics must be a fully fledged industry. And I researched it and was absolutely shocked that I couldn't find any small independent consultancies. And the big companies, the Deloittes and the Mercers of this world were up and running with HR analytics, but there were no independents. And I figured that actually my marketing career had equipped me with all the tools that I needed to answer these kind of questions. And so I figured it was probably about time that I had a new career change, and so I created Pearl Metrics. But before I did anything really silly like resign, I went up to the CEO of the company that I was working for at the time. It's one of the world's biggest media agencies. And I showed her a mock-up of an HR model that I'd been working on. And the idea was that you could put in all of your data inputs and work out what levers as a business you had to pull to affect your employees and your outputs. And I said to the CEO, if you let me build this model on your data and use it as a case study, I'll build it for free. And she absolutely bit my hand off, which sort of proved to me that actually the C-suite was crying out for data-driven sort of models. But it was very short-lived, my excitement. What I found was that there was very little data in the HR industry. Actually, there were no budgets to build a lot of HR models. And actually, more worryingly, there was a big fear of analytics and moving away from gut instinct. So I was going to have to move slowly in this industry. The biggest name in HR analytics is Josh Bersin, who works for Deloitte. And he's coined this brilliant model called the maturity model. And it really shows the different tiers of analytics available in HR, starting from very basic operational reporting all the way through to predictive modelling. I was aiming at the very top with WYSI predictive models, and actually I realised very quickly that I was going to have to come back down to the beginning. And back in 2013, Bersin ran a study to look at the different levels of penetration throughout his maturity model, and it really highlighted why I was struggling so much to get my career in HR analytics to take off, because he showed that less than 50% of companies were doing anything basic like operational reporting, which meant that if they were asked to put together some stats on who'd left the organisation that year, they'd have to go into the raw databases to pull the data off themselves. And you can think of the time wasted and the opportunity for making mistakes was huge. And his report also showed that actually, as you moved up this maturity model, only 4% of companies were doing anything like predictive modelling. So no one could really tell you analytically why people were leaving their organisation or when they might be leaving. And what I'm sort of pleased to say is that trend has really started to change. So Google Trends shows you the number of people who are now searching for the term HR analytics is trending massively. To put this in context, I started Perlmetrics back in 2013, sort of when it was very embryonic. And things are really, really starting to take off now. And Josh Bersin's conference recently, he said that actually 39% of large organisations are now putting HR analytics departments within their organisation. So, it's nice that this trend that has so much resonance and importance is really starting to take off. But there are some forward-thinking companies, and I've had the pleasure of working with Virgin since 2014. I can't share anything, obviously, that we do because it's highly confidential, but I can tell you that they have been challenging the quality of their data. They've been building fantastic operational visualization tools that help the business across the globe make decisions off the back of their people data. They're real champions of their people and putting people first, and my job has been helping prove the value of that to the business, because it's not just a nice to have, as Branson says, it results in happy shareholders. And so they've really made it a joy to work in this field. So what does a company need to put this kind of program in place? Well, there's a common misconception that you just need a statistical analyst. But frankly, that kind of person is going to cost you a fortune. If they were able to do everything, it would be fantastic. But it's not just one person. In order to get HR analytics embedded into a company, you need a team of 4 different functions. Now, I'm not saying you need to go and hire all 4 of these functions. Actually, the chances are you can lean on existing knowledge within a company. But the first thing you need is your IT expert, because you're going to have to pull data from lots of different disparate data sets. And, we've heard about potentially cleaning your data. Well, the IT experts are going to be there to help you do that. Once your data's in place, then you're going to need your reporting experts. And they aren't necessarily your skilled statistical analyst, because their job is to present your data visually and allow people to dip in and out of it and make quick decisions. The often forgotten person, but we've talked about this, is that person that bridges the gap between the analysts and the business. And the consultant's role is to go through the business and ask questions and work out what HR analytics can do for an organisation. Because it's not just about answering HR questions, it's about answering people and business questions. And then last but not least is your statistical expert, and they make up that fourth aspect of an HR analytics team. And their background might be in ANOVA or segmentation or propensity modelling, or kind of ideally all of the above. So once you've got your team in place, what are you going to do? Well, the first thing isn't to go and build your data sets and sort of get your data in front of you. It's to trawl through the business and use your consultants' expertise to work out what the business questions are that we need to answer. And once you've got your questions, then, I think my slide's building, in theory, it's about prioritising all those questions, because it's absolutely certain that you're going to have more questions than you can possibly answer. So you prioritise your questions, and then you get your statistical expert and your reporting expert together, and they work out how you can address those questions and what kind of analytical routes and maybe the order that you're going to take to answer those. Then you build your databases and you cleanse them and you make sure all the data is there. You might need to collect more data, so you might be building a business case for how you do that, and that might reorder the analysis path that you're going to take. Then you execute your analysis and you come back and you evaluate how well you did, and then that leads full circle back to more questions from the business, and so the cycle continues. I wanted to end my talk on, I think, a company that's just pioneering in the HR analytics space, and that's Google. And I've got two sort of public examples of how they use analytics to inform their people decisions. A few years ago, Laszlo Block, who's Google's head of people analytics, decided to build a longitudinal study. And it started in 2012, but Google being Google, they're intending to run it for 100 years, which I just think is a fantastic goal. Twice a year, they conduct a survey with over 4,000 randomly selected Googlers, as they're known, and they ask things like, they ask static traits like personality, they ask characteristics that change, like their attitudes to culture or to work projects, and then they look at how Googlers interact with other people. And even though they've got lots of long-term goals, they've asked their long-term questions, actually their short-term goals were sort of to improve well-being, to cultivate better leaders, and to understand how work impacts happiness and vice versa. And I'm sure there are lots of examples that they have, but actually the one that really resonated with me was one of the early results, and they said they found that only 31% of employees were able to switch off when they went home at night. And so what they did as a result of that, in Dublin, they ran a pilot study called Dublin Goes Dark. And they said at the end of the evening, everyone had to drop off their devices at the front desk before they left. And what they found was that everyone had much more restful night's sleep, and then actually came back into work the next day feeling refreshed and ready to go. And the last example from Google is about recruitment, and they're using HR analytics fundamentally to decide who they interview and the shape of the interview. But their analytics is so advanced that they're also looking at the person who's conducting the interview, and they look back and they say, how well did you predict how that person was going to perform in our organisation? Which I just think is a remarkable thing to be doing. And then they're offering training and potentially not letting them conduct interviews if they're not good at predicting how well someone is going to perform at Google. So they've got two, I think, fantastic examples of how HR analytics can be used to save a company money, to make an employee's journey better, and use data science to sort of facilitate change. And I just think HR analytics is a data science that, for very good reasons, is starting to take off. So thank you very much.